Hi, I'm Hazel Dukes, and you are watching the 85th Annual New York State Convention.
Here to discuss the state of Black business and how we can build a new ecosystem for Black and Brown businesses in our community is my friend, Economic Chair Gary Johnson, with his Economic Development Workshop.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Economic Development Workshop. My name is Gary Johnson, and today we will be speaking about new approaches to minority economic development in New York State. We have two esteemed guests with us today, Julie Harris and Michael Garner. Our first guest is Julie Harris, one of the most tenacious MBE advocates that I know. She is the co-founder of the Council of Black Architecture and Engineering Companies and is an external advisory board member to the New York City Department of Design and Construction. She is an Olympian, a world-ranked champion athlete, and award-winning coach who motivates and leads multidisciplinary teams for winning outcomes. Our second guest is Michael Garner, the Chief Diversity Officer at the MTA, a position he has held for almost 13 years. Michael has made his personal and professional mission to create a more diverse industry by empowering minority-owned and women-owned businesses throughout the state. Prior to joining the MTA, Mike had positions at the New York City Housing Authority and the New York City School Construction Authority. He is also the current president of 100 Black Men of New York. Like Julie, Michael and I are both participants in the MBE Leadership Summit, chaired by Reverend Jacques DeGraff. Julie, Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
To make significant change, we must understand where we are before we understand where we need to go. Julie, let's start with you. What do you think are the challenges of today in terms of minority business development in New York State?
I think the challenges are, one, that we're in a cycle where we tend to do what we've always done. And that challenge is bringing us to right where we are, which is where we started. And what we need to do is really look to try and innovate our way out of this and think new ways to get the opportunities that we're looking for, to create opportunities for our businesses, which in turn create opportunities for our communities. And I think the main challenge is getting folks to think different about this, because we've been thinking the same way, obviously, because we wouldn't be where we are 30 years later doing the same thing. So we're in thought lock, action lock.
So would you feel that there are greater or fewer contract opportunities from government agencies in New York today than there were, let's say, 20 or 30 years ago?
Well, when you look at the amount of sums of money that they're available from agencies, there's more opportunities. But when you look at the percentage of participation, especially for Black and Latino, Hispanic firms, it's dismal. So how do we bridge that gap to where, as the opportunities are created, more and more financial opportunities are created for our businesses? And I think that's where we are. We're somewhere where that paradigm hasn't shifted to where we're going up. Obviously, there are more businesses probably getting opportunities, but I'm looking at the change in dynamics for our companies, like the leadership for our companies. Are we getting these opportunities so that our companies can lead and learn, our workers can lead and learn, and be in leadership positions in industry?
Michael, Julie has talked about us not really making enough progress. What's your perspective as the Chief Diversity Officer of the MTA? How do you see things?
It's getting better. If you talk about where we are in the Empire State, former Governor Andrew Cuomo really put his muscle behind creating opportunities for certified minority women-owned businesses. From a data point perspective, if you look at what he did during his tenure, he created the most diverse and effective minority business program in the country. So he assigned 30% goals on 97 agencies and state authorities. As a result, at the MTA, we paid $1.1 billion to minority women-owned firms in 1 year. And I've been there going on 12, 13 years. When I got there, we were ranked number 97 with $114 million a year being paid, which equated to 6% MWB inclusion. Fast forward, we are ranked 1 with $1.1 billion paid and 31%. And so, although we are not where we want to be, we are more further than what we used to be. And so, out of that 1.1 billion, 400 million or 37% went to black and brown companies. And so we are living now in a pre-dawn period in which President Biden's $1.2 trillion infrastructure program bill is getting ready to come down, in addition to $3.5 trillion. And so we are on calls every week creating strategies that's going to allow us to maximize contract results and dollars paid to black-owned businesses. And so 7 agencies are on calls every week, and we're going to do that. And so we're strategizing.
So there are a lot of numbers there. And in this industry, we hear numbers all the time. New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer comes out with an annual report detailing how the city is doing, the various city agencies, and how it's doing in terms of its contracting, particularly for people of color. And repeatedly we see that contracts to black firms and Latino firms and Asian firms are always in the low single digits. But we hear there's progress. How do we reconcile those two things?
Well, one of the things, I guess, I'm going to retake back what I said with the biggest challenge for us. It is the disparity within the diverse population. I think that's a great challenge when you reference those numbers. Is, to me, that's the progress I think I see lacking. While there's more made, we're still at the bottom. I think when you look at New York City particular, I think the MTA is a state agency, and they've done different things with the state, but black women are 0.2% of contract dollars spent. Black men are at 2%, or I think that's together. So, I mean, progress, yeah, but come on, 2%. That's what keeps me up at night, is trying to figure out why. Mm-hmm. If we've been doing this for 30 years, why are we at 2% of all the contract dollars spent in New York City?
So from your perspective, why are we there? As an agency that has done things a little bit differently, how is it that the MTA has apparently made progress under your leadership, whereas the city, and now you can't speak for the city agencies themselves, but what's being done differently that we can use as a model moving forward?
It's called accountability. I just spoke in San Antonio 3 weeks ago, and I spoke at a big major conference, and I spoke on effective MWB programs. And there's 4 top characteristics. 1, the person who is running your diversity programs must report to the top, to the CEO or the president. 2, that person needs to have adequate staff. 3, person needs to have adequate resources. And 4, the person must be talented, innovative, and must be empowered to do his or her job, duties, and responsibilities in executing the mission of their office or department. If anything is missing out of those 4 top traits, I can tell you that your program is not effective as it should be. Second, at the City of New York, there was 20 years of inactivity. Rudy Giuliani got in. The first thing he did was he erased Mayor David Dinkins' MWB program. The first day he got in. Mike Bloomberg gets in. If there's anybody who should have understood how to build a business, it was Mike Bloomberg. He's a brilliant billionaire businessman who got fired on Wall Street, took his $12 million parachute, and built an $80 billion company. There was no emphasis on that. And so it is accountability, because I'll tell you firsthand, anytime you got a phone call from the chamber, we call the Chamber Albany, the state capitol, and the conversation started out with, help me to understand this. You knew that was not going to be a good conversation, right? So it is accountability, putting people in a position in order for them to execute their duties and responsibilities effectively. And if government is not awarding contracts or paying dollars to a certain segment of the population, then organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League 100 Black Men, have to hold government accountable. Because hold us accountable with coming up with creative solutions and strategies that's going to allow us not only to award contracts in a cost-effective manner, because it's taxpayers' money is being spent, but in an inclusive manner, where every segment of the population of taxpayers are benefiting from these taxpayer-driven funded contracts.
And I also think, too, one of the things that has happened, Gary, is the subjugation of these programs, subjugating us to be subcontractors. And 30 years of that has not helped us build our businesses the way that we need to, because when you think about it, when it's a prime contract, they're going to take most of the good work, and then they give us the work that they don't want to do, or the lower margin work. And particularly me, my coalition is architects and engineers. Our architects and engineers want to design, they want to do the work they want to do, but all too often they subjugate us to being document controls or special inspections and things like that. Those things do not build our capacity as engineers or in the field, because we're not exercising that. And engineering is a linear profession. No matter whose table you sit under or whose banner you have across your chest, you're going to engineer the same way. And so that has in turn created, I think, a second-class citizenry for a lot of black-owned businesses.
So, so the point that Julie makes is a great point.
It is.
Right, because internally, we fight battles with our engineering department that says that it is more cost-effective to manage one large mega contract than it is to manage 7. So my response to that is that when you bundle contracts, and the MTA, we have very sizable contracts.
Right.
We have a $12 billion contract, which is linking Penn Station to Grand Central. We have a $8 billion project that's extending the 2nd Avenue subway from 96th Street to 125th Street in Harlem. We have a $2 billion contract in Nassau and Suffolk County building a 3rd track. And that's only 3 contracts out of about 4,000 that we are currently managing. And so my duty and responsibility is to tell our engineering department, yes, it may be more cost effective, but it's excluding a whole population. And so we have started debundling projects.
Well, let me ask you about that. Let me say 2 things. One, I too come from a construction background, so it's easy to have this conversation when it pertains to construction. But there are lots of firms throughout the state, throughout the city, that don't do construction. There are a range of businesses and services that could be provided, whether it's accounting, whether it's engineering, whether it's architecture, whether it's legal. There are a range of businesses. Why the dominant focus all the time on construction, and what is being done to facilitate other businesses participating in government contracts? What more can we or should we do? Because not everyone has the ability to start a construction firm.
I'm glad you asked that question. And the reason why the major focus is on construction is because that's the dominant budget item in each one of our agencies. So construction is 55-60% of the whole total budget. Right. The MTA has a $54.8 billion 5-year capital plan. $54.8 billion, right? So although we buy other goods and services, the dominant sector that we spend our money in is construction. But you asked that question, so I'll take this time to answer it. So we are one of the largest buyers of debt in the country to pay for that $54.8 billion capital program. We have a slate of 41% of investment bankers are Black, Hispanic, and women. There was a point in period of time a year ago when we were paying 58% of our investment banking fees to New York State certified M&WB firms. I started looking at legal services. We were paying 4%, now we're up to 16%, and we're not going to be satisfied until we reach the governor's 30% goal in the area of legal services. We are one of the most dominant buyers of hardware. We buy hundreds of millions of dollars of printers and other kind of hardware. we reached out to 2 of our manufacturers. We said that we wanted you to extend your special discount pricing to New York State certified M&WBE resellers, authorized resellers, because it doesn't do any good for us to issue a purchase order and send that purchase order down to Austin, Texas, where Dell is headquartered.
Right.
And they simply sent us 1,000 boxes of printers back. So we asked them to extend their special discount pricing so we can buy our products locally from a mom and pop who may be in Harlem, who's an authorized reseller. The more product that we buy from that mom and pop, guess what? The more employees that they're going to hire and the more taxes that they're going to pay. It's a win-win.
Right.
So Dell said, yes, we in. HP said, no, we're not. We called HP back the next day and said, we're taking all of your business and we're giving it to Dell. HP called us back the next day and said, we're in. And so a conversation I had a few weeks ago, why are we going to allow manufacturers to dictate how they're going to sell their products to us? No, you got this twisted. We're going to tell you how you're going to sell your products to us.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that and add a little bit to what you said too. When you think about this, when you look at these departments within these agencies, what do they look like? And a lot of times, and I'll speak from engineering, law, because I came from an inside of agency, so I have that perspective as well as the outside, is that you get this comfortability of who you work with. So whenever you're thinking about those services, you kind of look within that circle and ask questions. And if everyone looks like a certain way, that's who they're going to bring to the table.
And we hear that a lot.
And it's, think about this, I've worked on probably 7 projects at $4 billion and plus. And when you look at the program and project management teams who makes decisions about the life cycle of that project, that doesn't bode well when we are not at that table when they're making those decisions, because the whole ecosystem of decision making is made from what supplies to buy and who to buy it from, what legal services are we going to have, who are we going to augment the program or project management team with. And if there's nobody that looks like us at that level, guess who they're going to pull in? And so that's why we got to really make sure that we look at diversity and inclusion, not only from the contracting part, but where the tip of the spear of the contracting is, and that's within the agencies. What do those departments look like?
Well, how can that be affected from a political perspective, or can that be affected? Many of those people are civil servants. I would presume they can't be moved.
No, it's not
How do you impact those decision-making lines within the structure that exists? You can always change a commissioner or director, but how do you affect the change and change the attitudes that they may have about the people that they've worked with?
Well, let's look at, oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say the Rooney Rule, the NFL. So as we starting to look at a major turnover in workforce, some of our diversity and inclusion officers need to start thinking about what that next level workforce looks like and be very proactive in terms of trying to recruit folks a dimension of folks so that looks like our communities. And I think that all too often doesn't happen too much, because it's like public service. Be honest, if you're a very talented individual, you tend to go to the public sector and you'll make probably $20,000 more than you would, the private sector than you would in the public sector. But I think, in speaking with Mike, I think he has some terrific, innovative thoughts behind this.
So let's be clear and stop playing. When a person runs for elected office, they're going to be beholden to the person who funds their campaign. And there's something that's called a transition team. And at the transition team, that's how you pick your agency commissioners. However, the accountability must be held on the commissioner at the top to make sure that their workforce reflects where they are and the amount of goods and services are going to be awarded in an inclusive manner. So if President Biden ran on a platform that he was going to eradicate poverty in the black community, he gave credence to the black vote of getting him elected, because going into South Carolina, he was dead in the water and his money was drying up. And so South Carolina got him an infusion, and then Super Tuesday came. And guess what happened? He was back in the #1 slot. He wins. We were on a call a few weeks ago where we are having these calls, once again, to set strategy. Julie was on a call, And we had a call with some of his cabinet members. And Julie asked the question, what is it that you're going to do to eradicate poverty in the black community with regard to awarding contracts to black-owned businesses? Well, that's unconstitutional. We can't do this, and we can't do that. So somewhere where the president has indicated he's running on this platform has not trickled down to the people who work for him. So where does the NAACP come in at? Where does the Urban League come in at? Where do 100 black men come in at?
How do we affect that change?
You affect the change because you then hold the president accountable to implement what he said he was going to implement based upon when he was on the campaign trail.
And you know, so funny, this policymaker was pretty high in the organization, I asked the simple question was, veterans, we take care of our veterans. There's a set aside, a program, contracting opportunity for them. There's a program and opportunity for women. That's not in the Constitution, but it's the right thing to do. And I don't understand how that's not right for especially African descendants of slaves who helped build some of the wealth that these very companies are sitting upon right now. And he just kind of like, wow. And then I spoke with one of the deputy administrators. He was like, I heard you laid it on him. I said, no, it wasn't that. It's just a fair question. Because when it comes to looking at people of color and creating opportunity, all of a sudden there's constitutionality and legalese and all these things, but we know it's the right thing to do. But for other sets of the population, it's okay to do it.
Well, you referenced the other sets of the population. I don't think that we do enough in articulating the importance of the communities that we serve in terms of our tax base. New York City, for the most part, is a majority city of color. And so therefore the tax base is considerable. But a very small percentage of that tax base goes to funding businesses of color. And arguably, it's similar throughout the state as a whole. While your comments about the president are completely on point, how do we take that same energy from the local level, whether it's a county level, a city level, and then the state level, to affect these kinds of changes and put pressure on individuals to make these changes on an agency level?
So you have city agencies, you have state agencies, and you have federal agencies. So the same scrutiny that you would give to the president at the federal level, you do the same thing at the city level with the mayor and then with the governor. I just indicated that our former governor, Andrew Cuomo, put his muscle behind the program. And there are a lot of great results. Is it where we should be? No. But it's a great start.
We can't be starting every 40 years, right? And we need to make progress.
We do start every 40 years. You know why? Because we as a people, we have a tendency of winning battles and losing the long-term war. And it is offensive that you're going to go through the same thing that your great-grandparents went through, and your kids are going to go through the same battles and issues every 20, 30 years because we don't have the ability to win the war. And we fight the same battles over and over every generation, every 10, 20 years, right? And we're back in the 1940s and 50s and don't even realize it because we do not have the ability to win the war.
Even though the population and the demographics keeps increasing. So we're getting to a position where population-wise, we are a majority, but we're still not having that impact economically. We need to change that.
We do, and public contracting to me is an economic equalizer. And opportunity creates capacity. It's not the other way around. The businesses has to have the capacity to get the work. No, once you get the work, you hire up and you're able to have more funds in your company to do things that you need to do. And I think we got this backwards because ever since I've came into the market to work, I always hear, oh, there's no capacity, there's no capacity. But I'm sitting here thinking, well, you got to have money to create capacity. And the money, to me, the contracting opportunities provide just that. If it wasn't the case, then why would all the big companies all work so hard to get contracts?
Carrie, we are in the Fortune 500 capital of the world, New York City, where billions of dollars of transactions are taking place every single day, both in government and in the private sector. We're talking about trillions of dollars in government money getting ready to come down to New York City and agencies like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and the MTA and other government agencies. We need to make sure, with accountability, putting people in place, making sure that those contracts are going to be awarded in a balanced manner. And if there's any impediments that will get in the way, then the advocacy groups like the NAACP and Urban League, government, elected officials, we got to come together to create a process that's going to allow us to award contracts in an inclusive manner. And like Mayor Bill de Blasio is doing right now, he's focusing on the black business community, singularly focusing on the black business community.
And one of the things, though, my group, what we did is we tried to re-engineer contract as engineers. I like to throw that.
Tell me about that.
So we've been working with different agencies, and we've really been looking at the language in the procurement process and thinking about where sometimes we look at this, all the multi-steps it takes to get a contract. And so we sat down with, say, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. This is interesting because the buy-down came from the top, a very empowered diversity inclusion office, but then to the table there's legal, there's procurement, there's engineering, there's design, there's construction. All the agencies chiefs sit on this call with us, and we sit down and we came up with 5 things that we thought were important. One is making sure that there's inclusion of black and brown businesses, prompt payment, contract language that we think that has just been cut and paste for 40 years that had really nothing to do with the procurement opportunity. And we went through all that and really came up with as Michael says, a balanced solution that where he put in place, and it passes board, where they can look at opportunities to make sure that contracts are awarded to the businesses in the diverse pool that aren't getting opportunities. And that took a lot of diving into the data and really figuring out what was going on in terms of who they were buying for and who was getting opportunities. And it's sad, if you do that at a lot of agencies, it'll throw you back. I mean, we're working with some of the New York City agencies trying to do the same exercise as well. And I mean, it's sobering.
So quickly, because we're not going to have much time left, but follow on that, and before I get to Michael, how do we publicize those successes, and how do we get our community to A, create more businesses so they can be at the table and partake of those opportunities, and simultaneously put the pressure on the elected officials and the agencies to disseminate the information about the opportunities and to award those contracts? Let's talk about that.
Well, one thing that I think organizations like ours and all advocacy agencies need to educate themselves to all the regulations and statutes, because there are some triggers in there that are really beneficial to us, but I think we go by word of mouth of what has been done or what you can't do because you heard this and it hasn't been done before. And I think what we've been able to do is look at these regulations and statutes and find where there's places and bridges for us to cross over. And it's a lot, because this has been going on for 30 years. Somebody put something in there that no one's really reading. This new administration for the Department of Transportation has put in a program that President Obama put in that no one really heralded and didn't pay attention to. Now it's revived in terms of local hiring and innovative contracting initiatives. We've had that since 2012, but no one paid attention to it. But now we are.
Michael?
Gary, let's look at the facts. When you have people who are at the helm, you got to hold them accountable. And hold them accountable by ensuring that taxpayers' dollars are going to be spent, once again, in an inclusive manner. What is the equalizer to 97% of adverse conditions that black people in this country are in fact living in? What is the equalizer?
Jobs, economy,
Jobs,
business creation.
Access to government
Absolutely.
contracts will eliminate 97, 98% of adverse living conditions. Lack of affordable housing, education,
healthcare,
medical health care, a job, access to contracts. And so this is about economics. I mean, we talk about voting rights and all, and that is extremely important. But at the end of the day, if we don't have access to jobs and contracts, we'll still be talking about this in the next 100 years.
So we only have a couple minutes left. I'm going to ask each of you, what is the takeaway that we should have for NAACPers in terms of what our action items are to improve the business opportunity for businesses of color in New York State?
The NAACP and other organizations must focus on economic development, holding government accountable, holding the private sector accountable for access to contracts, access to their boards. Voting rights is great, but it must be a focus on economic development, holding the president accountable, holding your elected officials accountable, holding them accountable so that government and the private sector has the opportunity to award their contracts in an inclusive manner as a way, a strategy of eliminating poverty.
Julie?
I think making sure that they activate and educate themselves to the process to know that, like we said, all the counterweights are dependent upon jobs. Jobs are created by contracting opportunities. And then the whole neighborhood benefits because I will be able to go and exercise my economic right to buy food in your store in my neighborhood. So I think it is incumbent on them to educate themselves about whatever these regulations are and also what projects are coming so that our businesses can be ready for them.
We've heard today from Julie Harris and Michael Garner. We have a lot of work to do as a community to ensure that we have increased business opportunities. This task will take the efforts of every single branch throughout the state. We must contact our local elected representatives on the town level, the city level, the county level, and the state level. We must interface with them so that they understand that economic development is a civil right. It is incumbent on us to understand the opportunities that are available and to disseminate information that we receive to our communities. This is our task. This is our mission. This is our future. Thank you.
Now, our panelists will present a live Q&A.
Gary, I'm going to leave it to you, but I want to thank you for your patience. We will say we saved the best for last because you definitely had some interruptions and we did not want to do that, but you still have a very engaged group of NAACP leaders. Gary was showing off and answering all the questions in the chat, but I'm sure that he has captured some thoughts of what the comments are in the chat, and I will leave it to all of you. Mr. Garner has joined us, so I will see you in a little bit. Have a good discussion.
Thank you, Tracy. All right. There were some great questions. Michael and Julie, thank you for being here for this live Q&A. I think the points that you made in the earlier session was very poignant. And I see that there are some questions that came through the chat. So I think one of the earlier questions is access. How do we improve access and information for our community in terms of receiving these opportunities and these contracts? What can we do about that? Michael, you want to start?
Yes, so we're out. We are broadcasting. We are announcing our $54.8 billion capital program. We are looking for diverse businesses of color to come in to the MTA. We have a website. I have a very hands-on staff. And so we are getting the message out of how you can work for North America's largest transportation network. That's the MTA. And we are looking for more contractors, businesses, vendors, and suppliers. And I will state my email address right now. So you can reach out to me. I will forward it over to one of my staff, and they will definitely get back to you. My email address is mgarner, MGARNER, at mtahq.org. We are hands-on and we want to do business with you.
Thank you. I put that in the chat. Julie, I like to refer to you a lot as one of my most tenacious friends and advocates in this industry because I think you are. And I think that your approach is something to be embraced, particularly how you've gone after some of the larger agencies in the state. Tell us a little bit more about using some of that energy as NAACP peers to interface with these agencies and get results?
Well, let me add on one thing that to Mike in terms of how you can get more information. One of the best ways to get a lot of information is to make sure your business is certified, either at the local, the state, or regional level with one of the government agencies. And you can certify as a sole proprietor, you can certify as an LLC, whatever level that you certify with. Once you get on those lists, and I think making sure you're educated to the right codes for your businesses, you get information from agencies to you, and they come in based upon how you register, what your codes are in terms of what services you provide. And that way you'll get a lot of the information. And then also just be diligent about going to websites for agencies that you think you want to go to work for, or organizations, because a lot of them will list their opportunities and their capital plans, and you can kind of see what work you want to do. And I think with a lot of our organizations, I think having a point person who helps with economic opportunities is going to be very key and critical, because sometimes they come out fast and furious, and having that point person get that information and disseminate it to your membership is going to be key and critical. And everybody's going to have to educate themselves on the process, on how to get work and what's out there and what you need to do to access it. And have a lot of energy about it. I mean, I am just one of those people that you know, being an athlete, if I didn't come in first, that mean I lost. But it meant every week I tried harder to beat Jackie Joyner Kersee if I was racing her, or see, I'm dating myself. So I think you just got to have that attitude.
It's okay. You know, well, you mentioned MBE certification. There are a lot of folks who say that MBE certification limits you in terms of your opportunities. How do you respond to that? Do you feel that a firm or businesses, Black-owned businesses, must become MBE certified? Do you think that they won't get the opportunities if they're not? What are your views on that?
They're trying to access government contracts, they have to be certified. I mean, that's part of it. And I think the old limitation that labeling yourself is going to preclude you from getting businesses. I think when you look in the mirror, you see what you are, and other people see that as well. So I don't understand that thought process.
Okay.
And the certification process is critical. It should be onerous. It should be hands-on, because what you don't want to have happen is to have white men in skirts take advantage of the MWBE program. And so we are even gone to the point, Gary, that we are working in conjunction with the Manhattan DA and the MTA's Office of Inspector General and the US DOT Inspector General. When we find MWDBE fraud, that case is referred over and that company is prosecuted. And so we have had the opportunity to recoup millions of dollars from large companies who were skirting the MWBE policies and program. And that money came back, and it started some of our other diversity programs. So a certification process must be strenuous. It must eliminate fronts. And when we find out that there is MWBE fraud, we don't care if it's on the MWBE side or on the large prime contractor side. That case is referred over to our IG. Let me give you an example. There was a case where a Black male allowed a large company to set him up in business, had him sit in an office, paid him a salary, and he didn't do anything. And we found out about it, and then we referred it over to our IG's office, and both companies were prosecuted. That was a front.
You know, I'm not sure if folks heard what you titled that as. I remember when you and I had a discussion on this. I think there was a little technical glitch. What did you call it? Men in skirts?
Men in skirts. No, white men in skirts.
White men in skirts. Everybody hear that? White men in skirts. All right.
Well, also, I mean, Gary, once you get certified, you get on a database so you can be identified as well. And I think a lot of folks don't understand that.
Right. And, in the earlier segment, we talked about other contracting opportunities. And again, Michael, you indicated that 55 to 60% of the capital budgets go towards construction. That still leaves a lot of other businesses and opportunity services, which you rightly alluded to. So, folks, there are a lot of opportunities for legal, accounting, catering, other kinds of non-construction related businesses that governments give contracts to. And I want to say this because I know our time is limited. As much as we focus or we continuously focus on government contracting, we've seen a whole host of sponsors and businesses interface with us, and we see them on television every day from the private sector. We have to interface with the private sector similarly to get contract opportunities for them. You guys want to comment on that?
Julie, ladies first.
The private sector, but one of the reasons I think I focus on public sector is the accountability. When you have MWE programs and that they're monitored, there's compliance a compliance program set up around them. And to be honest with you, in the public sector, they don't have to do it if they don't want to. It's the right thing to do and they don't. One of the things that I think that's epic in all this is the culture of failure that exists within the process of these programs. I mean, if a lot of times, if they don't make their goals, oh, well, so what? Where else in corporate America can you fail or have a failure and not make something and you're able to keep on getting work with agencies or other folks? So I think one of the things that we really have to do is make this a winning proposition and make it about winning. Make these companies understand that every time they make their goal, they won. But when they don't make their goals, it's like, oh well, I didn't make it.
So Gary, if you look historically speaking, government has led the way with civil rights, with creating minority business programs, and unfortunately, the private sector has followed. And so I did indicate that we live in the Fortune 500 capital of the world, where not only billions of dollars are being spent every day in the government sector, but billions of dollars are being spent in the private sector. The NAACP and other civil rights organizations play a key role. If you identify private corporations that's not hiring Black people the way that they should be hiring them, that's not putting Blacks on their board, that's not buying products from Black-owned businesses, you have an obligation to boycott that company. Because the only way that the private sector is going to change their way of doing business if you hurt their bottom line. If the Black community is 45% market for GM and Verizon, why aren't there Blacks on the board? Why aren't they buying a lot of their goods and services from Black-owned companies? And so, the Urban League, the 100 Black Men, the NAACP, they serve a critical and vital role in bringing balance to both government and the private sector.
No, and I appreciate that comment. I remember some years ago when the NAACP did a major analysis on the hospitality industry and graded them. And the effects of that over the years has allowed more diversity within the hospitality industry in terms of ownership and equity, as well as more spending. And so that's why I stress that we have to do this on a dual track basis. So I think, Michael, your point is exactly correct. We can do both public sector and private sector. I think we're just about out of time, but you guys want to make some closing comments? Julie?
Yeah, one thing that I want to make sure that we understand is, like, when you look at the reasons why we're not given opportunities, like, oh, we got to prop the businesses up, or they want us to give something. I'm going to start treating those things that they say as tropes, racial tropes, because it's all from the old adage that we're ill-prepared, we're illiterate, we can't do anything. And we're talking about, 2 generations of us having the same degrees, going to the same schools with folks and having the same certifications. So I think moving forward, we just got to start calling it what it is and getting out there and really working our way into these opportunities as a collective.
And I would say, that we are in a very opportune time right now. There's transition going on in New York City with our second Black mayor who will assume office on January 1st. There is a governor election in the year of June 2022. We are at transition. We need to make sure that as we pivot in this transition, that Black-owned businesses are going to get their fair share of contracts from both the public and the private sector. And if it's not happening, then we need to identify why it's not happening and come up with solutions that's going to allow us to move forward in an inclusive manner. And the NAACP can be a valuable partner in doing that. And Dr. Hazel Dukes is just doing a fantastic job of bringing out issues and coming up with the solutions. And Gary, I also want to thank you for your leadership of this panel, but walking the talk every day, and with you creating a business, and before long, you are going to be a very wealthy individual with your focus and your vision.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all, both of you, for your insights. If there are any other questions from the chat,
So Gary, we are out of time, but what we're going to do is send you the questions that you did not ask in the chat, and then you can facilitate the answers with Michael and Julie, and we'll get it back out to the team.
You must have a different chat from me because I didn't see it. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Wonderful workshop. And we appreciate all of you and all of the leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, everyone.
Thank you.
That concludes our 85th annual convention. We really had an enjoyable, informative time, and we want to thank Dr. Hazel Dukes for giving us this opportunity.